Alright folks, today I'm here to bring you my thoughts on the finale of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon, The Book of Carol. Now, it's been no secret this season hasn't really blown my socks off story-wise, and unfortunately for me, the finale pretty much followed that trend for the most part. I've gone pretty in-depth with my grievances over the last few reviews, so I'll try to keep my points short, but this episode had some pretty strange writing choices at times in my opinion. However, that doesn't necessarily mean I thought it was outright bad. As I've mentioned in pretty much every review for this series, the set design is just on another level. Whoever is responsible for this needs to be in charge of every spin-off's apocalyptic look. 10 out of 10, beautiful and creative. I feel like I put a lot more stock into the design and cinematography of these shows than most, so despite my various issues with the story, I would never say it's terrible for those reasons alone. But let's just jump into the episode's plot. Now, before the season came out, I saw a ton of people annoyed that it was going to feature a musical sequence with Daryl singing, but in my opinion, the way it was executed was actually really great and endearing. I heard Daryl wasn't originally supposed to sing here. Instead, it was supposed to only be Laurent, but the actor was nervous, so Norman Reedus joined in. Which is a nice story, but I find weird considering how well the scene works with the two doing it together. You can't always get what you want. Opening the finale and closing it feels like it's speaking to me directly, which I found pretty funny, but is also speaking to the characters. They want to go home together, but sometimes life doesn't work out the way you thought it would. And given the plane can only hold 3 people, it fits really well in my opinion. But speaking of the plane, I've got to admit, now that we've seen the full outcome, Carol's lie to Ash really feels like it didn't have any major consequences. I do like the whole you could still save a kid perspective Daryl gives him, but the way it was set up really made it seem like Ash was gonna purposefully leave them behind out of anger or something like that. Carol was on a lying spree this season, so it would have been nice to see those lies actually catch up to her. But this way, Ash does stay a likable character, so I get what they were going for. However, something I love, this season is full of potential environmental storytelling videos. While making their way out to Daryl and company, Falou, Cadron, and the rest of their crew stop at what's said to have once been a mental institution converted into a hospital complex. And inside, the reanimated bodies of the patients still remain where they died all those years ago. This place looks amazing, and you already know I'm going to be making a video on it in the next couple weeks. However, while looting the chateau, the group would be ambushed by the Pauvre remnants who revealed Janae 2 is still searching for Laurent to fulfill the prophecy. And despite fighting them off, a few do get away. I said it last review, but I'll say it again. Killing both Janae and Losang before the finale just to introduce another character to fill that void is really weird. She's a straight up replacement for what they needed in this episode, and for that, she gets the title of Janae 2. Although, at least Janae was actually intimidating. This lady just isn't, in my opinion. She ambushes Anna while trying to get Laurent's location, but ends up having to strike a deal to give her the plane in exchange. Not very assertive, if you ask me. However, surprisingly, what's left of Pauvre along with Anna arrive at the abandoned stadium the very next scene, which I do appreciate them getting the show on the road. But while making their way through the ruins, Anna reveals it was always her plan to lead them into an acid walker ambush. And just as quick as she's introduced, Janae 2 is bit on the arm as she makes it out the gate. Which, whatever. But as Anna tries to escape right behind them, she's locked on the other side and fed to the walkers. Now, I do like Anna's death in the context of the story. She ended up sacrificing her life for the safety of the boy despite that not being her intentions going in, but the actual execution was kinda weird. I do not like when characters are getting ripped apart and act like it's not a big deal. It's nowhere near as bad as it was in that one scene during Fear Season 8, but imagine getting torn apart by human teeth. There's no way you wouldn't be screaming your head off. But as Falou, Cadron, and the rest arrive to see their friends off, Pauvre crashes the party and begins to fire at the plane. And I gotta say, right here is why Cadron has become such a badass character. He's literally injured, wielding an automatic rifle in one hand, and doing way more damage than all the other Gurriers combined. I know there's been a lot of love online for Cadron, and I fully get it, which is what makes his ending this episode even more frustrating, but we'll get there. However, during the firefight, Daryl volunteers to stay back and fight off Pavor while Ash, Carol, and Laurent begin to take off. And just as it looks like they aren't gonna make it off the ground, a shot is fired, taking out the pursuing Gurriers by Carol, who stayed behind to assure Laurent and Ash's safety as they take off towards the Commonwealth in America. Obviously, Carol was going to be staying behind as well, and to my delight, I didn't find the reasoning contrived. The scene was tense and well executed. As mentioned, I would have preferred Ash leave them all behind as an FU for Carol's lie, but seeing everybody smile as they take off was actually pretty heartwarming. And to be honest, I'm kinda just glad he made it out of this season alive. However, after realizing her failure, Janae too takes her own life right then and there, which, again, whatever. But I think it's safe to assume Pavor will officially collapse now, given literally everyone of note is dead. And with that, all major threats in France have now been handled, for better or for worse, as our survivors gather at a location acting as a meeting spot for two Scottish guides, who will take them all the way to England through the Eurochannel tunnel in search of a boat back to America, which obviously isn't Spain, which is a bit strange. So for the love of God, please give Season 3 more episodes if you're going to be jumping from place to place. But during some downtime that night before taking off, we get a couple scenes of note where Falou gets together with the newly introduced Alika, which will actually be important shortly, but we also get to see Daryl finally get his chance to tell Cadron he didn't kill his brother. Which, man, just the fact Cadron came to peace with Daryl fully believing he was responsible really does speak to how interesting his character is. But in some of our final gorgeous wide shots of post-apocalyptic France, our survivors finally arrive at the tunnel's entrance, which is said to be a 9-hour walk through to England. But as they all say goodbye to Alika, who wishes to stay behind in Paris, Falou announces he won't be going either, as he has found something worth staying for. Which, again, it is annoying they are clearing house with all the interesting characters in France to make room for the new cast next season, but at least he didn't die and gets a happy ending. This I'm more so okay with. Now, as our remaining 5 survivors enter the tunnel, Daryl asks the guides what England's like, where we get quite the shocking revelation if true. Allegedly, England survived the outbreak with the army succeeding in locking everything down. We'll come to see some evidence shortly that may go against that still being the case, but if what they said is true, that is a major revelation for the Walking Dead universe. Like, holy shit, a country could have possibly survived the initial outbreak? That is actually insane and exactly the kind of lore drop I like to hear, even if they had fallen in the years since. It's really tough to say if this is a fact, but given the group comes across a fallen military checkpoint deep within the tunnel, there could be some merit to their words. However, here we get what's probably my favorite set in the whole series, as on the other side of said military gate lies a camp with still functioning generators, surrounded by some strange bioluminescent substance that caused its soldiers to lose their minds from the fumes. And my god, are these visuals cool. I'm always a fan of walkers consumed by their environment, so these things were awesome to see on screen. But as awesome as the set piece is, I'm rarely a fan of hallucinations in The Walking Dead. I found the environmental story left behind really intriguing, but to spend the last 20 minutes within France watching our characters trip out felt like a bit of a strange choice writing-wise for the grand finale. I think Cadron turning on Daryl after losing his mind from the fumes was interesting, until he ran off into the darkness, never to be seen for the rest of the episode. As mentioned, despite not minding Falou's exit, it felt like more of an excuse to clear out the cast given this Alika character was just introduced. But Cadron just running away from the story is hilariously bad if this is the last time we see him. I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt and say we'll see Cadron again in Season 3, but to be honest, I also wouldn't be shocked if we didn't. Now, to end out the finale, Carol hallucinates seeing Sophia, And as previously stated, although I don't really care for these types of visions in the show, I did like how the writers explored whether or not she wants to continue on in this world given everything she's lost. I just preferred the more subtle way of showing her grief through the flashes in the previous episodes that brought her back to that time momentarily, rather than her outright expressing her feelings to a full-on hallucinated apparition. At least for Carol, these are wounds that have been dealt with a long time ago that are simply resurfacing. But in Daryl and Isabel's case, her death feels too fresh for this not to feel like a last-minute effort to give a sense of closure, in my opinion. If you needed a drug-induced hallucination 2 episodes after her death to achieve that, maybe you killed her off a bit too early, but what do I know? However, as the 2 Scottish guides attempt to leave the rest for dead as they take the last 2 remaining gas masks, Daryl gathers the strength inspired by fake Isabel to fight back and take them out. And after finding Carol in her fragile state, the 2 don the mask before heading down the remaining stretch of tunnel, as "you can't always get what you want" closes us out. Now, I hope my pros and cons regarding this specific episode were balanced out properly in this video. As stated 1,000 times, the production value of the series was great, the concepts were intriguing, and the characters were genuinely gripping. But I feel most of the plot lines proposed over the last 12 episodes just didn't have enough time to develop. We were given the concept of a child who could be immune, but didn't get to see if there was any validity to these claims. Laurent's possible immunity had triggered wars, so I highly doubt Daryl or Carol would ever reveal this information to anybody once back home. So I have to assume it'll be many years, if ever, before this question comes back up. Although, maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised and this plot point will resurface in Season 3, but I highly doubt it. We got the potential of a country overcoming the dead through aggressively engineered walker variants. One of the coolest concepts to come out of this franchise in years. But we get no explanation on how that could have possibly worked or how it could have been discovered before witnessing the collapse of that very organization altogether. And I promise, this is the last time I'm going to talk about it. I know it's getting annoying, but I have to just say it for my final thoughts. We were teased of great revelations regarding the beginning of the outbreak, the virus itself, mysterious shadow government teams, and naturally running walker variants in the World Beyond post-credit scene taking place within France, and didn't get any follow-up on any of these mystery box plot points while we were in that very location. I don't feel I'm stepping out of line being disappointed in the lack of answers regarding all these really cool concepts. I can't imagine we're going to be going back to France anytime soon, so I unfortunately believe these questions and possibilities are going to remain unexplored for quite some time. But with that being said, I think I'm going to give this specific episode a 6 out of 10. It's kind of hard to put a rating on these episodes, but for me, the bulk of the score comes from the production value and characters, with most of the lost points coming from the strange writing choices or general direction in story. I will say though, the teaser for Season 3 does look really interesting. I love the tone they're going for, and I do think the idea of having them go on a country-hopping road trip could be executed really well. But a part of me will always be a little disappointed we only spent 12 episodes in France. I'm sure elements of this series will come up in future videos, but as of right now, these have been my raw thoughts on Daryl Dixon Season 2. I'm excited to hear what you thought about this finale and the season as a whole in the comments down below. And remember, if you ended up loving it, that's totally okay. My words are not gospel. But that's gonna do it for me today, folks. As always, thank you so much for watching.